Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the session on how to score 760 on the GMAT. My name is Rajas Sudana. I'm one of the co-founders of eGMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting me in this webinar, I have Sandeep. Sandeep is a GMAT strategy expert. He's actually a very senior GMAT strategy expert at eGMAT, and he is going to be your co-host today. In this webinar, we're going to talk about a few interesting things. First of all, we're going to talk about what the GMAT tests and then from that point on, we're going to help you create a personalized study plan, or give you the framework to create one at least. Then we're going to really talk about what does it take to execute on that study plan. The study plan is a great starting point, but not everyone who has that study plan um, ends up getting a 730 or a 760 score. So we're going to really look at what does it take to execute that study plan. What are the various pitfalls? And then the third thing that we'll talk about is how do you track that improvement. Um, so overall, this is about a 2-hour long webinar at 7 a.m. My time in Phoenix, Arizona, and so we'll end at about 9 a.m. or 9:15 a.m. depending on the number of questions that you have. For those of you who are who've heard me talk for the first time, or for those of you who just recently registered on eGMAT, I want to just tell you that we have a very comprehensive free trial. We have, sample concepts in sentence correction, critical reasoning, reading comprehension, as well as algebra and number properties, and I think we have geometry as well now. So if you want to really look at how is learning on our platform different from learning on other platforms, looking at these sample concepts is one of the best ways that you can go about experiencing the program. We also have a lot of many upcoming free webinars. If you want to know more about our instructors, the strategy webinar is the one where you'd hear me talk. Then we have a number properties webinar that's tomorrow, 24 hours from now. And then next week, which is exactly a week from now, we have a reading comprehension webinar. So in number properties webinar, we're going to focus purely on the remainder equation. We're going to look at how using this one equation you can go from solving the easiest to the most challenging question, and we will solve a few data sufficiency 700 level data sufficiency questions here. RC webinar, very similar theme. Again, we're going to start with the very basics of what does it mean to comprehend a passage, and then we're going to use those strategies, which we call as reading strategies, as I mentioned over here. And we're going to apply those reading strategies to solve a 700 level passage. In fact, you're going to be able to solve that 700 level passage with ease. Also, we have so at eGMAT we've been working on our brand new quant course that was released earlier this week. We have the launch event for that quant course this Wednesday. If you want to know how is this quant course different, how has it changed how people learn, how is it that it has delivered twice as many Q49 plus scores than the leading quant course in the industry just in the last 3 months or so, then do register for the launch event. Okay, with that, let's get to know you guys a bit better. So we have about 120 odd students here in the webinar. I want to kind of figure out just who you are and in the context of GMAT and MBA, what is it that that you guys are aiming for? So let's look at when do you plan to take the test and what is your target GMAT score. Okay, let's get a few more responses. With regards to the target GMAT score, about 80 responses, give or take. All right, so that's some really good data points. So with regards to when do people plan to take the test, there's about 68 of you who haven't taken the date as of yet, or about 43%. Another 20% are in that 46 to 75 days. And then we have about 37 or percent of you in that 0 to 45 days or so. That's wonderful. Even if you have the test in the next 15 days, I think from this webinar, you'll be able to understand a few things about the test that will help you plan better, approach the test a lot better. We'll address certain questions such as, hey, are the first 10 questions important? Should you approach them any differently? Or what metrics should you be monitoring if you are? in those last 10 to 15 days or so. And with regards to the target GMAT score, the biggest group, surprisingly, is 760 plus. Usually, when I ask this question, that 730 to 750 bracket is about 50%. There are about 50% more students in that bracket than in the 760 or higher. So that's good. This is a fairly aspirational group. So with that, let's go right into the main webinar pane. As I go there, the screen will have changed for you. You should be seeing how do you score 760 or better on the GMAT. I'm going to put in a yes/no poll, and if you can see that presentation, how do you score 95th percentile or better on the GMAT, then please select yes. I've just reopened the poll. All right, pretty much everyone can see that. That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so since about 75% of you are aiming for that score of 730 or higher, I want to just talk about why should you aim for that score of 730 or higher, and why is it that 730 or in fact 740 is the new 700 overall. And at a very high level, if you were to just remember why should you aim for, these are three reasons why you should aim for that high score. First is you're aiming for a top B school. They now need that high score. So when I say top B school, especially in the US, European B schools will do it 710, 720, but US B schools, they kind of are looking for the score of 730 or higher. The second piece is when you think about scholarships, majority of the scholarship money, which again, USP schools account for about 80% of scholarship money that's distributed worldwide. Majority of that money goes to students who have the score of 730 or higher. And then, why should you aim for a top MBA? Because you're going to be much more rich. I mean, the delta in total earnings over a 10-year period, when you look at someone who's graduated from a top ranked B school versus someone who's graduated from a tier 2 B school, that's the highest it has ever been in the history of the MBA. Again, some data to back those claims. You can see how median scores at top B schools have trended, and this is data from 2014 to 2018, and in fact, even in 2021, these numbers have remained there more or less. Essentially, we've seen this trend at a majority, in fact, 95% or more of top of B schools. There are certain B schools that give out more elaborate stats, schools such as Sloan and Columbia, and over there 80% of the admitted class has has a GMAT score of 700 or higher. So essentially what these schools are saying is if you don't have a 700, don't even bother applying. And for some groups, what these schools are saying is if you don't have a 740, don't bother applying. And this is despite the fact that from 2014 to 2018, there was a decline in GMAT test takers. 2021, the test taking population is more in line with what was in 2014. So it's supposed to be one of the most competitive admission seasons. And this trend actually goes beyond top 25. Essentially whatever top 25 do, schools rank 26 to 50, they follow, and what you see, the dark circles over here are schools where you see the maximum score increases over in the same time period, and you can really see that it's kind of edging towards that 700 mark. Atul says, do we know what typical score for Indians is in these schools? Atul, yes, we do. In fact, we'll be writing an article on that very soon, but look at the median score at 20 points. That's your typical score. So that was statistical data where we talked about stats across many students. This is what we call as anecdotal data, so real examples of former eGMATers. Nishant, one of our former students, scored a 690, was rejected by a bunch of schools. And again, the schools told him that hey, they liked his candidacy, his GMAT score was bad. They just plain told him. And Tuck and Smeal will do that to you. They'll give you really good feedback. So so he improved his score to 740, applied with practically the same application, and he got a full ride from Ohio Fisher as well as an admit from Columbia and a bunch of other schools. Pravi was rejected, or rather was waitlisted by a bunch of schools with a 680, improved his score to 740, and received multiple admits. He actually received a total of about $200,000 worth of scholarships. KK or Krishnakant, again, he was rejected by 15, not 5, not 10, but 15 schools when he scored a 680. 4 out of the same 15 schools admitted him with a full scholarship when he actually scored a 720. Again, This is just, uh, you can see the power of that high GMAT score or so right there. In fact, all three of them have talked about their stories on our YouTube channel. You can go watch their stories. But bottom line is, you know, a lot of people think your GMAT score plays only a 20% weight, but in terms of just as a filter, it's way more important today than it ever was. The second piece is when you look at scholarship, and this is data that you'd only get with eGMAT because we have the highest number of 700 scorers. Um, Based on our estimates, more than 50%, in fact, I'd say 80% of all scholarship money goes to people who get to that score of 720 or higher. Um, so when you think about total scholarship money, these are merit-based scholarships that USB schools award. That's about 350 million. And based on this, our data that we get from our students, at 55% of that money goes to people, the 3% of population that gets to 740 or higher. Now, can anyone guess if you get a score of 740, what percentage of people who get a score of 740 actually get a scholarship? Let me see if I can. Yes, I'm going to put in a poll question here. What percentage of people who get a 740 secure a scholarship? Let's get a few more responses. But 80 responses out of 169 folks over here. 88, 90. Let's get to 100 responses. 96, 97, 99, 100. Let's broadcast results and end the poll. Um, the, the, the right answer is based on the data that we have, and we have data from about 800 odd students who are in that score range. That the number is between 75 and 85, so it's about 83% or so of 740 or higher scorers get a scholarship. I don't have a poll built for this, but would anyone wager what is what's the average scholarship amount that we've calculated that these folks get? 740 or higher, so 740, 750, 760, and so. Interesting. So the average scholarship amount differs based on schools. So if you look at an M7 school, 740 or higher scores get about $30,000 of average scholarship from M7 schools. The same number increases to about $100,000 if you're looking at top 20B schools. So M7 means, you know, Harvard, Stanford, Booth or so. The scholarship amount for you know, this bracket is smaller. And when you take it to someone like let's say a Ross or a Keenan Flagler, that jumps up to a 100 grand median or so. So it's very interesting how these play out. And in fact, with 760 or higher scores, the numbers are even more interesting. So essentially, so when you look at, you know, top 20 plus M7, that's kind of where you get to that 40,000 odd number. And so factors that decide scholarship, your GMAT score, as well as your likability during the interview. Uh, so uh, so this was statistical data. Has some more anecdotal data, which were your real case studies. Two of our former students, Mansi and Victor, both of them scored 770. You know, Mansi got a full ride from a bunch of schools. She went to Harvard, where she got 90K scholarships. Victor got full ride from both Ross and Keenan Flagler, so getting a full ride is about 120K scholarship from both of these schools. And when he actually got these fellowship status, Kong Bui. And so this is the maximum amount that you see over here, not the total. Total is about 4 to 5 times as much. He got a full ride from 5 business schools. He got a really special scholarship from Ohio Fisher, which he eventually ended up attending, where he not only got a full ride, but he also got $1,700 a month in his pocket as living expenses to study at that school. Okay. Similarly, you talked about these students. You can really see their highest scholarship amounts or so. Again, KK also got multiple full rides, very similar to Kongbui's case. What's the average work experience for these people? About between 4 and 7 years is the average work experience. It's yeah. So in fact, if you want to actually see some of these, you can go to our YouTube channel. They're all there. So for example, Sharon got a $280,000 worth of scholarship. A bunch of these people, Asta got scholarship from Kellogg as well. So you can go to our YouTube channel, watch these success stories. For students securing scholarship, what's the average score and how far? You know, yeah, even 710 score of secure scholarship. I mean, KK had 720 and he secured scholarships. But when you want to really get into the scholarship zone, that's why I say 740 or higher. Okay. And right now we have about 170 such stories, and this is about 2 months back. This presentation is from 2 months back, but if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see 170 such success stories, and we add about 2 every week or so. And here's a quote by John Fuller. He says, "Hey, someone with a 770 is way more likely to get a financial award. Why? Because the school may want to buy that high GMAT score." Okay. And the third reason why you should aim for that high score, which I think is even way more important than a scholarship, is the delta in total earnings. The beauty of what scholarship is, you realize the gains right away. The delta in total earnings, you've got to wait year on year, and you realize part of the gain every year. So to do this, I'm going to compare two schools, Babson and MIT. In fact, for MIT, this number is about 150K right now. These numbers have been going up. But for Babson, the number hasn't changed. And the reason I take these two schools is because both these schools are in the Boston area. They're about 20 miles from each other. 70% of graduates from both Babson and MIT get a job in the New England area. Essentially, this means that they have access to a very similar set of opportunities. Whether they get those or not is a very different thing, but they have access to it from a geographic standpoint. And when you look at the median salaries, they're off by quite an amount. When you look at the average sign-on bonus, that's off by quite a bit as well. So the first year compensation, the delta is about 60K, even if you take the delta to be 45K, because you want to be conservative and do a linear cash in over a 10-year period. You're looking at about 450K. And these are two schools located about 20 miles away. What's the difference? So bottom line is these 3 points actually could lead to about a delta of at least $500,000, and this is, in my opinion, a conservative number based on what I've seen over there. So aim for that 740 or higher score. FP says, what about chances of scholarship with zero work experience? Actually fairly low, not as high. And Ravi says, what's the difference between a full scholarship, full fellowship, and scholarship? So a scholarship could be a partial tuition waiver. A fellowship is usually 100% tuition waiver, or in fact even covering a portion of living expenses. Some fellowships have tuition waiver as well as plus books and laptops. So that's fellowship is that way you're not paying a single penny. I, for example, received 2 full fellowships when I did my MBA. So I didn't pay a single penny for my MBA. These are US specific numbers. European B schools don't provide as many scholarships. They do provide a bit more conservative with regards to their scholarships and fellowships. But yes, whatever they provide are based on high, combination of your GMAT scores as well as, again, the likability during the interview. Okay, so guys, that was just this was not an admission consulting session. We don't do admission consulting, but this was just to really get you motivated towards scoring high on the GMAT, because getting there is not easy. It requires a lot of effort, and there will be times during your GMAT preparation that you would want to kill yourself, and these numbers are a means to providing motivation. All the questions that you've asked, they are, we have a very elaborate blog. You can go and search eGMAT plus anything, and you'd be able to get to that over there. So with that, I want to just now talk about how do you go about acing the GMAT, and so let me just ask this one question, because let's kind of come back to the GMAT piece here, because I think you guys, from the questions I can see you guys are fairly motivated to earn those scholarships. So I've warmed you enough. So what's the key to acing the GMAT? Let's talk about this. What is the key to acing the GMAT? Okay. Practice, 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 timing, structured approach, timing and accuracy, practicing hard questions, unwavering commitment, persistence. Okay, good. All right, so here is the thing, you guys can see when you look at these responses, it's just there's a reasonable amount of variety in these responses. There's a certain commonality I think that I see, which is one is that, hey, you are each one of you understands that you need to spend time to ace the GMAT. It's not a cakewalk um, uh, when it comes to acing the GMAT. And so, but some of you have talked about timing as an issue. Some of you have talked about smart work, which again is a very broad term. Some of you have talked about concept and techniques, which is very interesting, which is, again, yes, you've got to do that. Focus and persistence, again, stay focused. Make sure you're not, make sure that setbacks don't bother you as much and they don't derail you. Detect and solve mistakes, okay, that's definitely there. Okay, not accuracy but concepts. All right, so good answers, and not one of these answers is I would say wrong, but there's a sequence in which you do all of these things that are listed. And for me, when I do this session, I want to just talk about that sequence, because doing the right thing at the wrong time actually leads to a bad result. So each one of the things that you've written down is probably the right thing, but if you do it at the wrong time during your preparation, and what is that wrong time, we're going to talk about that. You might not see the outcome that you've been waiting for or looking for, despite putting in all the effort or so. Okay. Drishti is saying she's an eGMAT student. She has a test in 15 days. Could you elaborate on a test strategy for approaching verbal questions? Drishti, first of all, if you want to really look at that part, that's about an hour from now, because this is a free session, about 200 students here. But really, you should be asking your eGMAT strategy expert, who can look at your account, look at about 200 odd data points that we have on your account, and can tell you what to do next. Because in this session, can't look at your account and tell you, and I don't want to give you generic feedback, because that might do more harm than good. So write to Dhananjay, write to Aditi, write to Archit, and yeah, they'll look at the data on your account, and they'll tell you exactly what you need. Okay, so coming back to this, the first thing when it comes to acing the GMAT is building ability. I mean, you've talked about practice. You've talked about being strategic. You've talked about this. All of that is important, but it's important after you have ability. If you don't have ability, nothing else matters on the GMAT. And which is the first thing I want you to take away from this webinar. Why? Because a lot of people, when they start preparing for the GMAT, they worry about answering questions as quickly as possible. They worry about, okay, I'm gonna take a mock test. I've got to learn how to figure out which questions to choose and which questions to leave out. Not important, unless and until you are in the last 10 days of your preparation, or the last 15 days of your preparation over there. They worried about building your stamina for a 3-hour long test. Again, and they do this by taking mocks. Again, not as relevant if you don't have ability. If you don't have ability, all of these things, even though they're important, they're not going to help you get to that high score. You won't even be able to get to a 650. Forget about a 730 or a 740 or so. And is there anyone over here who's actually focused on these things early on in their preparation and ended up with a score lower than 650? Is there anyone here who said who did this, focused on this? Yeah, you do that. You don't even get to a 650. Forget about a 730. So the first thing that I want you to make sure you focus on is that you build ability. Okay. So let's talk about what this word ability is, because ability is not an abstract term in the context of the GMAT. It is actually uh, a very quantifiable metric, especially in the context of the GMAT. In fact, in the context of any competitive test, ability is a fairly quantifiable metric. So just to really tell you what differentiate ability from accuracy, because accuracy is something that a lot of you focus on. What is accuracy? When you take a quiz, what is the percentage of questions that you answered correctly? So if you take a 10 question quiz, if you answered 8 out of those 10 questions correctly, you say my accuracy is 80%. Okay, ability is a term which is measured in percentile, not percentage, and it's a comparative metric. So, which means that how good you are compared to other test takers. And if we take that example of that same quiz, if you took a quiz and you scored 8 out of 10, and someone else took a quiz and scored 9 out of 10, the difference in ability for you versus him would be the difference in rank. You might at 80% accuracy might be at 60th percentile ability, and that particular student at 90% accuracy might be at 95th percentile ability. It just depends on how the distribution happens to be across with regards to that quiz. Okay, to do that, let's kind of talk about how the GMAT works, and why do we say that when it comes to acing the GMAT, you've got to worry about building ability. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a sample GMAT test, and this is a sample adaptive test. The GMAT's a bit more sophisticated, but it follows the same principle. How this works is on the y-axis, you actually have difficulty level of questions. On the x-axis, you have question number. So as the test proceeds, you go from question number 1 to 6, and as you go higher on the y-axis, the questions served to you become more difficult. Okay, so let's talk about student 1. Okay, so we're going to look at two different students here. Student 1 gets the first question right, which is where you see this tick over here, gets the first question right, gets the second question, which is more difficult. How do you judge that it's more difficult? Because you're going higher on the y-axis. So the higher you go, the more difficult a question becomes. Gets the third question, which is even more challenging. He gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question, which is, the difficulty level of which is between that of question number 3 and question number 2. How do you figure that out? If you draw horizontal lines, you're going to get to that. And then when you get the fifth question, he gets the fourth question right. You can see that tick over here. He gets the fifth question, which is slightly more challenging, and he gets that wrong. Now, we're going to only worry about the first 5 questions because it allows us to make judgment or compare to test takers. The second guy, actually, you can really see how he goes. Gets the first question, again, similar median difficulty level, gets that wrong. Gets the second question, much easier, gets that right. Gets the third question, a bit harder, gets that wrong. Gets an easier fourth question, gets it right, and gets the fifth question right as well. Okay. So if you were to stop the test at question number 5 and ask, who will have scored higher, what would you guess? And let's, if you were to end this at question number 5, if you were to end the test, who do you think would be doing better? Let's get a few more responses. I have about 50 responses. Let's get to about 90 responses or so. Who will have a higher score if I were to end the test at post question number 5, that is? And then let me actually put in the short answer poll here below this, so you can really tell me why do you think student 1 or student 2 will have a higher score. Okay, you can put that in the broadcast results, the short answer pod over here. Why? What's the reason? We end the poll, broadcast the results. About 86% of you think student 1 will do better, and you guys are absolutely correct. So I'm going to hide this poll here. I'm going to extend the short answer pod so it spans greater area, more area on your screen. Good. That's wonderful. Yeah, as you guys can see, most of you are saying that, hey, because student one answered more difficult questions, correct? And that's a beautiful response, and that's absolutely correct. Okay, I'm going to broadcast results so you guys can see. My bad. I should have done broadcast results before, so you can see that many of you are saying that, and this is perfect, which is exactly the response that I was looking for. So the reason what I'm trying to tell you is, on the GMAT, if you were to look at this, right, you have this thing called a question picker, and question picker, depending on how you've responded to questions in the past, picks the difficulty level of questions that it should serve to you. And for student one, if you look at this, he's gotten 5 questions. Each one of those questions they are either at the average difficulty level or above average difficulty level. Student 2, who only got 1 question, so the test didn't even serve him difficult questions. He got 1 question which was at the average difficulty level, which was question number 1. Beyond that, the test did not even serve difficult questions to him. Why? Because the test was constantly measuring his ability, and it determined that this guy doesn't have the ability to answer difficult questions correctly. So, and that's really important to understand over here. Why is it that, on the GMAT you've got to build ability? Because the kind of questions served to you will depend on the ability, what you prove to the test. Okay. By the way, both of these students have identical accuracy. Both of them in the first 5 questions have answered 3 of them correctly. So the thing that I want to tell you again is, acing the GMAT is about building ability and tracking accuracy. A lot of people actually do this. I don't know how many of you belong to one of those camps where I've seen people post on GMAT Club and on Facebook saying that, hey, I solved 80% of the official guide correctly. Can you estimate what score I would get? Or my accuracy in this is so much. Can you estimate the score? Have you seen those posts, by the way, or have you been one of the posters who've actually posted such a question? There's nothing wrong in admitting that. Seen them around, yes. And bottom line is, when you ask a question such as this in the context of the GMAT, it's very difficult to answer that question. Why? Because I don't know what difficulty level of questions have you attempted over there. Okay, so worrying about accuracy just accuracy in the context of the GMAT is not a great idea. And tracking your progress just through accuracies is not a great idea. So remember, I said ability is a very quantifiable metric in the context of the GMAT. We can really look at how is ability quantified, how can you measure your ability, how can you track your ability. But bottom line again is, remember this, your GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. Okay. So for those of you who try to guess your score, depending on your accuracy, here, this is something which would be a shocker for you. What you really see is these are GMAT prep test screenshots from 2018, which is when GMAT prep, when we had GMAT prep and not the official GMAT mocks. So at that point, the official tests gave you a lot more insight on how the test worked. And so we were able to learn more about the test from the simulations we did on GMAT prep mocks. Okay, so here are 2 screenshots of 2 students, and what you really see is, you look at question numbers 11 to 41. Practically, these 2 students are identical. Both of them have made 9 mistakes between question numbers 11 and 41. The only difference is that this guy got these 2 questions wrong. And if you focus just on accuracy, you would guess that, hey, their scores are 2 or 3 points apart. Their ability is probably 5 to 7 percentile apart. The reality is very different. Student 1, the guy who made just 9 mistakes, had an ability score of 97 percentile, which means that what the GMAT told him was that, hey, out of the 200,000 people who take the test every year, you are among the top 6,000 students. Student 2 got a V32, and essentially his ability was 65th percentile. What the GMAT told him was that out of the 200,000 people who took the test this year, you're among the top 70,000 uh, students or so. Okay, so again, if many of you, how many of you over here are saying, man, the GMATs are really harsh test? Let me just put in a yes no poll question, and when you look at this data, you're inferring that, hey, the GMATs are really harsh test, and this is something that I can't afford to make mistakes. How many of you are really saying that? Let's get a few more responses. Based on this, is how many of you are inferring that the GMAT's really harsh? It really punishes you for making mistakes, and especially for making mistakes early on. 3, 2, and 1. But 76 responses. This is a question that I expected most of you to jump on. Why? Because you're making a judgment on your understanding of the test. So right or wrong, either way, you're going to learn. With me in the poll, I'm going to broadcast the results, but 80% of you think GMAT's a really harsh test. The reality is actually just the opposite. The GMAT's a test on which you can afford to make mistakes. Why? Look at this guy. He made 9 mistakes. He still got a 97th percentile. I mean, tell me a test where you can, where you have about 2 minutes per question, and you get a quarter of the questions wrong, and you can still be among the top 3 percentile of students. Tell me a test. No, there isn't. Most other tests where you are, and by the way, if the GMAT were a harsh test, I'd be happy. Why? Because it'd be able to sell more courses, right? But it isn't, and I want to make sure that you understand this, that GMAT's a test of ability. What you're looking at in the context of accuracy, this is on the CAT, you don't get 2 minutes per question. It's a test, that is a test of speed. It's a completely crap test, and if you want me to tell you why it's a crap test, I'll be happy to record a video on this. It's not a test of ability at all. But coming back to the GMAT over here, let's kind of model these two test attempts on our understanding of a computer adaptive test. And as you do that, you'd really understand why is it that this works. Okay, actually, I think I have a chart here. Let's go back. Let's actually go to this one here. So let's go to student 2. All right, student 2, the guy who actually got V32, got the first question, medium difficulty level, got that wrong. Got the second question, which is the 30th percentile level, he got that wrong as well. So my question to you quant whizzes out there is, tell me, if you are a 90th percentile student, what is the likelihood, or the joint probability as we call it in technical terms, of you answering a 50th percentile question and a 30th percentile question wrong one after the other? What is the joint probability that a 90th percentile guy would get those questions wrong one after the other? What's that joint probability? That you'd get a 50th percentile and a 30th percentile question wrong one after the other. Or in other words, if you are a Formula 1 driver, what is the probability that you are gonna actually mess up on a simple turn, a simple curve? Very low, right? Everything can't happen during the test. You can't be a Formula 1 driver and essentially mess up those things. Okay, so the answer is less than 1 in 10,000. For those of you who are quant whizzes, if you think about the bell curve, which is around that 90th percentile point, you'd see that the 50th percentile point would be outside of 1 sigma, and the 30th percentile would be around that 2 sigma point. You do that joint probability, you'll get to that number of less than 1 in 10,000. As a formal algorithm designer, I used to do these probability calculations. So the third question that this guy actually got was a 15th percentile. Why? Because the test wasn't wrong to think at this point. This guy's not a really smart guy. He got a 50th percentile question wrong and then a 35th percentile or 30th percentile question wrong, one after the other. So next question, 15th percentile, he got that right. The following question, 25th percentile, he got that right. 35th percentile, got that right. 50th percentile, got that right, and over here. And this guy, the moment he started getting 80th, 90th percentile questions, he started making mistakes once again. Student 1, or the V43 guy that we talked about, got the first 10 questions right. By the time he was at 5th question, he was already getting 90th percentile questions, and he continued to answer them correctly. Now, remember I told you these are GMAT prep attempts. Both of these students were eGMAT students. This guy on his actual GMAT got a V35. Okay, and this guy got a V44 if I remember correctly. So GMAT prep did a really good job with regards to estimating their ability. Can a case 2 student go back to a case 1 student? Absolutely, yes, he can. In the majority of cases, he can. Okay. Bottom line is, if you have the ability, so is it true that the first 10 questions set the tone for the entire test? So yes and no, and I'm going to tell you yes and no. Why? Because the one conclusion that I don't want you to make, or the two conclusions that I don't want you to make, are these which are there on this. But let me tell you, let's get to the first 10 questions in about 5 minutes, because I have 2 slides on the first 10 questions. So hold your breath for that. But what the GMAT looks at, coming back to ability being a quantifiable measure, right? What the GMAT looks at for these 2 students is the measurement of abilities within these subsections. So when you think about a verbal score, the GMAT's not measuring this 97th percentile ability. The GMAT's measuring your SC ability, your CR ability, and your RC ability, and then by combining these scores, it arrives at this over here. We call them subsections. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Now, when you look at these 2 students, the V43 and the V32 student, through a lens of ability, can you see that these students are very, very different? Can you see that? The numbers are very different here. Yes. And this is what the GMAT measures. So these are numerical numbers that the GMAT gives you in the enhanced score report. Okay, and so these are, by the way, also numbers that you ought to aim for while you're preparing for the test. Okay, so again, as I said, your GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. Now, so your GMAT score, as I said, is composed of 5 subsectional abilities. What are those 5 abilities? There are 2 abilities in quant. You have an combined ability of algebra and geometry, and then 1 ability in arithmetic. Arithmetic contains number properties, word problems, and sets, PNC, probability, etc. On the verbal side, the subsections are fairly simple. Okay. The thing that I want you to know is that each subsection is independent. So how you do in critical reasoning or in sentence correction has no impact on the difficulty level of questions that are served to you from sentence correction. So every subsection is independent. Every subsection has an equal weight. A lot of people think, man, RC is more important than SC is more important than CR, and so on and so forth. No, that's not the case. We've done simulations of thousands and thousands of ESRs. They come to a very, very standard weight. Okay. You need a target ability. So bottom line is, if you're aiming for that 740, depending on who you are, there are about 30 combinations that lead to a 740 score, and depending on who you are, there's an optimal combination of these abilities that can lead to a 740, 750 score. And that optimal combination ensures 2 things. One is it has the highest likelihood of you reaching that 740 score, and second is that highest likelihood, more often than not, also coincides with the shortest time. I mean, case in point, if you're weak in quant and strong in verbal, then you should maximize your strength in verbal, and you shouldn't be aiming for a Q51 if you're aiming for a 740 score. On the other hand, if you're weak in verbal and strong in quant, you should aim for a Q51 and then make up the difference with verbal. In general, that strategy makes sense, but then when it comes to the GMAT, you don't have just 2 points, you have 5 points, which leads to a lot of permutations and combinations, and that's where you need that optimal strategy over there. But the thing which a lot of people don't understand is that how you build ability, how you increase your ability scores in this, that process, the sequence of studying that you need to do is identical. And by the way, if you have innate ability, there are certain steps that you can absolutely skip and save your time and move on to the other steps or so. Okay. The first question that you need to answer when it comes to thinking about your GMAT score is, what are the target abilities that are optimized for me? Given my starting ability, what are my target, what are the optimal target abilities for me? And the second thing is, how long will I take to get to those target abilities? Okay, why? Because acing the GMAT is all about building abilities. Why? Because your GMAT score is a combination of these abilities. So another data point before I talk about how do you go about building abilities is that this one shows two things. One is that your GMAT score is a combination of your ability scores. You can see this guy scored a V40. He actually, and that V40 is composed of these ability scores. The second thing is essentially this guy made many mistakes during his attempt, and yet on his attempt, and yet he was able to get to a 91st percentile on verbal. So here is his GMAT attempt. Again, this is an old attempt. An ESR from an old attempt or so. So you see a 41 question test. The current 36 question test has an identical algorithm. Not even a similar, but an identical algorithm. So how should you go about doing this? First block. In this case, when the questions were medium and medium hard, he actually got most of them correct. The moment he started getting hard and very hard questions, he made mistakes, but even though he made mistakes, he was still able to get a 90th percentile. Why? Because he made mistakes on hard questions, not on easy and medium questions. So for those of you, those guys who are asking about the first 10 questions, you guys still here? Yes, no? Yeah, right? So can you make mistakes on the first 10 questions? Absolutely, as long as you don't make mistakes on medium questions or easy questions. And by the way, you make mistakes on a medium and easy question anywhere on the test, you're going to be penalized the same. Okay, it just so happens, these are official mocks, not eGMAT mocks, but eGMAT mocks actually are way more accurate than official mocks. So, but these are official mocks. I didn't want to put data from eGMAT mocks in this case. Guys, if you have a question, please put them in the Q&A pod, because the short answer pod, I clear that again and again so that I get fresh responses. So bottom line is, you can still make mistakes and get a high score on both quant and verbal, which eventually leads to a high GMAT score if you make those mistakes on hard questions. Atul has a great question. Since scores are relative to your peers, and does that mean that there's a time of the year when there's comparatively higher or lower competition? Really great question. It's one of those questions which I wish more people asked. The simple answer is no. Why? Because your scores are averaged over a 2-year period. So to exactly correct against that bias or so. But you're thinking in the right way. Okay. Now, if you want to download that guy's ESR, it's on GMAT Club. This guy is number 5, Aksul. You can click on. I'm actually going to click on the link for you, and you can download his ESR, or you can download it later on. I'm going to hide this over here. I'm going to bring back my short answer pod in this case. Okay, so questions that you guys had about the first 10 questions, and then I'm going to talk about the questions about the question. I'm going to answer the question about mock test as well. These are the questions, right? Do first 10 questions matter? Should you approach them differently? And should you spend more time on the first 10 questions? These are the questions that you guys had about first 10. Just let me know if there's anything else around the first 10 questions. Okay, so short answer over here. Do the first 10 questions matter? Yes, they do. Should you approach them differently? No, you shouldn't. Why? And should you spend more time on the first 10? No, that would actually kill you. Okay, Let me tell you why. Okay, let's assume you are this guy who's a 90th percentile guy. Okay, if you're a 90th percentile guy, what it means is by definition your accuracy around on medium questions is going to be 90%. That's kind of the definition of being a 90th percentile guy. Without having 90% or higher accuracy on medium questions, you can't be a 90th percentile guy. So which means that if you're getting a medium question served to you in the first 10, you should be able to get it right majority of the time if you follow the regular approach. However, if you don't follow your regular approach, what's going to happen? You will likely falter on it. How many of you have actually marked a question correctly and then say, man, this is the first 10 question in a mock test. I'm going to revise it again and I've selected the incorrect option? How many of you, anyone, while taking a mock test, said, first 10 question, I'm going to focus more. And you focus more and you end up going to the wrong answer? Yes. Why? Because despite being a 90th percentile student, you change your process of answering questions and you mess up on questions that you shouldn't have. Okay. Hans has another great question. Is the first question or the first few questions always easy or medium level? Not always. Majority of the time they are. Okay, but 70 to 80% of in 70 to 80% of the actual GMAT they would be. The thing that is there is, if you get a hard question early on, and then if you look at people talking about the enhanced online GMAT saying a first couple of quant questions have been hard question. Even if you get a hard question wrong, it doesn't matter. Because the test looks at the difficulty level of, the test is not looking at, hey, this guy answered the first question incorrectly, so I'm going to penalize him. The test is saying is, hey, he answered a medium level question incorrectly, and then he answered another medium level question incorrectly in SC. So if he's answered 2 medium level questions incorrectly in SC, then essentially he's not a really smart guy when in the context of SC, which is what you would judge as well. Anyone over here has hired people? Anyone over here has hired people? When you're hiring people, and let's kind of take something which is as simple as being in an interview, and you ask a very basic question, and if that person answers that question incorrectly, and then you ask another basic question, and that person again makes a mistake on that, then what's your judgment on about that person when you're hiring the person? If that person gets 2 basic questions wrong. No. You basically say, this guy is not for me. Not a fit. You can't hire him. That's the same thing that the test does. Okay. But here is the thing, right? If you are the right fit, if you get easy questions in an interview, are you going to mess them up? If you are the right fit for the job, no, you're not going to mess them up, right? Especially if you answer them in your regular tone. If you try to do something special, that's when you're going to mess them up. The GMAT works the same way. Does that make logical sense, by the way? This is not rocket science. This is very, very logical. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why the GMAT is the only competitive test that the results of which are in line with students' performance in year 1 in a B school. The GRE, the SAT, the ACT, they have absolutely zero correlation with regards to how students perform in the grad programs. Okay. Here is the makeup of a 90th percentile guy. Okay. A 90th percentile guy will solve 90% of medium questions correctly, will solve 80% of medium hard questions correctly, but 65% of hard questions correctly, which means if you're getting a hard question, there's a 35% chance or 1 in 3 chance that you're going to get it wrong. That's what a 90th percentile guy is. He doesn't get all questions wrong. And that's how the test more or less makes a judgment about you. By the way, if you make mistakes here, what do you think about the test's propensity to serve you hard questions? What's going to happen if you make mistakes on medium questions? Will the test serve you hard questions? No, it won't. Then it can't even tell you whether you are a 90th percentile guy or not. Maybe just in the first set. Yeah, a couple of hard questions in the first set. Why? Because this test is still making judgment. But otherwise not. Ishita says, what's the average score of a 90th percentile guy? Ishita, can you translate that question? 90th percentile on the GMATs, but 700. But again, remember, this is subsectional level. So if you score 90th percentile on all subsections, all the 5 subsections, you're looking at a 770. Okay, so this is subsectional level. On the GMAT, when you worry about that GMAT score, you're worrying about that 740, 750. Don't worry about the 740, 750 because that's an outcome. That's going to happen automatically if you worry about your subsectional scores. Out of 51, you need a V40 for a 90th percentile. That's 91st percentile. Okay. So the takeaways are, if you are a 90th percentile guy, you're going to answer those medium questions correctly anyway. Okay. And the hard questions, the test doesn't penalize you as much. So focus on building ability and don't do anything special on the first 10 questions, please. Your ability going into the test is what you want to translate into the test. You don't want to do anything special because if you try doing something special, 9 out of 10 times you're going to score below what you deserve. Okay. So how much time do you need to get to that 760 plus score? And we're going to answer that question. Okay, and the question is not how much time is required to prepare for that 760 plus score, because if you go on our YouTube channel, you're going to see times ranging from 9 months to 9 days. Okay, the question that should be, how much time do I need to get to that 760 score? How often should you take mock tests considering a 2 to 3 month prep time? Just in the last month, not before that. If you're taking mocks before that, you're doing more harm than good. You're wasting time. You're going to move away from your prep multiple times. Let's talk about taking mocks during your preparation. What happens when you take a mock test? You say, okay, I've studied CR for 10 days. Let me to go take a mock test. You take a mock test, you do well in CR, and then you move on and say, let me just now start studying sentence correction or on number properties. Does that happen? You study one topic for 10 days, you take a mock test, and you start studying another topic. Right? That's absolutely a recipe for disaster. Why? Because if you've not done CR enough, if you've not reached that 85th percentile ability in CR, then guess what's going to happen? You might start studying the next topic. You're going to start forgetting CR. Right? This happens. You go from CR to RC, and then 10 days later you say, man, I'm not doing in CR. Right? Has that happened? Oh, sectional tests you should, which is what we call ability quizzes and cementing quizzes. You should do them, but at the right stage of learning. Okay. Okay, guys, no personal questions. This was a generic question for the benefit of everyone. Personal questions, if you want help with those, we have specific people who can help you with those questions, and because we need a lot more data from you. What are the chances of scoring 90th percentile in the first attempt? If the metrics line up, the chances are upwards of 80%. If the metrics don't line up, the chances are lower than 10%. Okay, you have to make sure in your prep the metrics line up. Okay, so let's go back to the more important piece over here. What are the target abilities that you should aim for in each subsection that help you get to that 740 score? And I'm going to talk about those metrics lining up. In short, if you want to know the metrics lining up, these are the metrics that should line up. And I'm going to tell you how will they line up for each one of you. Okay. So let's talk about personalized study plan. Okay. So at eGMAT, when we ask ourselves this question, what should a study plan do? There are 3 answers that we want you to have. One is, we want you to be able to visualize how you're going to reach that target GMAT score. Number 1. Number 2, we want you to know exactly how much time you would need to get to that score. So you're visualizing not just the ability scores in various subsections, you are also visualizing the sequence of preparation. You have that calendar view in your mind. That's number 2. The third is, you should know where are you putting this time, which means when you're studying SC, what percentage of that time are you putting in to study concepts and learn application? What percentage of that time are you putting in to master that application, what percentage of the time are you putting into refine to perfection, and then what percentage of the time are you putting in while taking mocks. Okay, so when you ask that question about taking mocks, it is that last step. After you've learned concepts, learned application, after you've mastered application, refined to perfection, that's when you start taking mocks, not before that. There's no point taking mocks before that. If you were to play a cricket match, and if you were to face Dale Stern and you were to hit a cover drive, you better perfect that cover drive before you actually go and face Dale Stern. That's facing Dale Stern is taking that mock test. For those of you who don't know cricket as a game, I'm really sorry. It's the same way as you know. Think about uh, getting a swinging pitch in baseball, and you better perfect your ability to hit a home run on the swinging pitch before you actually go and face someone from a pitcher from Red Sox. Okay, so yeah, so we're gonna take a case study of two students. They're two very different students. Both of them have a score of 600. Both of them want to get to 740. And the purpose of this illustration is I want to kind of show you how even for two individuals starting at the same point and aiming for the same score, which is 740. So 600 identical starting point, identical target score. Their study plans are going to be super different. Okay, so Abby and Chase, these are two students. Abby is someone who has more balanced score. She has a Q42 and a V31 as a starting score. This is the score that you get, let's say, after the first week of preparation. So you kind of understand what the GMAT's about. And Chase is someone who's strong in quant. So he has a starting quant score of Q49 and then essentially has is weak in verbal and and hence has a V23, which is more like a 25th, 30th percentile. So how many Abbeys and how many Chases do I have over here? Just so I know. Let's get a few more responses. How many people associate with Abby versus, and more or less, you don't have to exactly associate with him. How many of you are strong in quant? How many of you have more balanced scores? If you're strong in verbal, you know, put yourself in the Abby camp as well. So yeah, but more or less half and half is what I see. 58% chases, 41% Abbeys. That's good. Well, any makeup would have been good because it doesn't matter. So let's kind of see. So, but just knowing these scores isn't enough. You've got to know your subsectional abilities as well. And I've tried to make things very simple here. I didn't want you guys to worry about remembering a ton of numbers. A Q42 could be composed of about 25 different combinations of arithmetic and algebra abilities. I've put those ability scores to be more or less identical over here so that you don't have to remember a lot of numbers. A verbal 31 similarly can be made up of about 50 different combinations. I've made more or less these combinations around that 60th percentile or so. Okay, and Chase, very similar. I've done a very similar job over here. He's an identical ability score in arithmetic and algebra geometry and around the 35th percentile on the SCCR and RC. Okay. And this is a very low likelihood that these scores will line up so well, but they lead to you worrying about fewer numbers, so that's why they are here. Okay, so when you look at this, I think it's really obvious that they don't need to approach the test the same way to achieve that score of 740. They need to leverage their respective strengths. The amount of time they put in quant and verbal should be very different as well. And of course, given their starting abilities, okay, they don't need to study the same content in quant and verbal. Okay, how do you figure out what's the right strategy for you? And to help each one of you to do that, about 2 years back we created an AI power utility called the Personalized Study Planner. What this one looks at is data from about 1,000 successful students. And it really says, given their starting abilities and their ending abilities, what are the most optimal paths for them, and then helps you take advantage of the success of those 1,000 students and suggests an optimal path for you. And the reason why we could do that is because we had those students. or so. So let's kind of look at this for Abby and Chase. For Abby, you take these ability scores in, and the system says, okay, given who Abby is, the best way for her to reach that 740 score is to make sure that she scores a V42 and a Q48, and these are the ability scores that Abby should worry about when it comes to her verbal and quant scores. Okay. Not only that, then the planner also really tells you how long will Abby need this is dedicated time to go from a 59th or a 60th percentile in SC to a 94th percentile in SC. You can see that ability score is quantified over here. A 57th percentile in CR to an 89th percentile in CR. Similarly, a 42nd percentile in arithmetic to a 65th percentile in arithmetic over here. Okay. So you need to get this certainty right at the very beginning, okay, so that you can visualize that prep, you can have this map in your mind. Chase goes through a very similar process, and for him, the target scorers are Q50 and V40, V41, and again, you can see the corresponding ability scores. You can see that Chase is spending a very different amount of time in the various subsections. And I know this is a bit blurry, so I'm going to list it out over here. So this is Chase versus Abby. Okay, and so what you see over here is that Chase is aiming for a Q50 and a V40, and Abby is aiming for a V42 and a Q48. And for those of you who understand the GMAT, who've spent some time preparing, you would know that a Q50 and a Q48 are very, very different scores. Someone who gets a Q50 is a very different student than someone who gets a Q48. The kind of effort required for a Q48 student to get to a Q50 is humongous. So for Abby, this planner is telling her you don't need to worry about a Q50, rather worry about your strengths. But the biggest piece is what this test tells these folks is that, hey, the amount of time they need to get to those ability scores. Even though Chase is aiming for a lower verbal score, he is going to spend 50% more time preparing for verbal than Abby is. Why? Because of the difference in starting abilities. Similarly, Abby is going to spend twice as much time getting to a Q48 than Chase would to get to a Q50. For those of you who are asking how much time does it take to get to a 730 or a 760, can you really see, the right question you have to ask is how much time do I need to get to a 740 or a 760? Why? Because for different individuals, this could mean different things. And for different individuals, where you spend that time could be very, very different. Okay, that I is very, very important. So stop asking that question, how much time does an average guy need? Because you are not an average person. You are an individual who comes with certain strengths and correspondingly has certain weaknesses that you need to overcome. So that I is very important because you are the one who's aiming for that 730, 760 score or so. So the target scores are different in with regards to that. Even though the target GMAT scores are identical, the target subsectional scores are different, and hence, because of the starting abilities being different, the time spent on various subsections and the various sections is different as well. Okay, but that's not the biggest difference. The biggest difference is where are they going to spend this time? What are they going to do over here in quant in these 3 weeks? What's Abby going to do over here? And what is she not going to do? And what is Chase going to do over here? And what is he not going to do? Okay. So this is something which I don't know why people don't talk about, but this is kind of the fundamental path to learning. And for any one of you who has achieved what I call as a top level proficiency in any profession, it's not just about the GMAT. In any profession, you've gone through this journey implicitly or explicitly, and you would know this. So when you want to achieve high proficiency in any skill, any profession, you kind of go through these stages. You learn concepts, which are fundamental concepts that you have to learn. If you're going to learn a computer programming language, you learn the basic constructs. Then once you have the basic constructs, or at least some of the basic constructs, you start to apply them to solve real problems, which is what we call as learning application. And you kind of iterate through this path multiple times. Once you've learned enough concepts and enough applications, you start solving more challenging questions, which is what we call as mastering application. And once you've done enough and you say, I've learned all concepts, I've kind of know how to approach even the more challenging problems, you still have some gaps, and you fix those gaps by through solving some of the most challenging questions, which we call as refining to perfection. Okay. And once you refine to perfection, you actually say, okay, now I know pretty much everything I need to know. Now I need to do that occasional revision to maintain my performance, but you stay at that top level. Anyone recognizes this journey that they've gone through in their professional or personal lives? Whether worrying about whether learning a sport, whether learning a computer programming language, whether learning a process of process optimization, it's just the same journey, right? Implicitly or explicitly, you've gone through this. Acing the GMAT, building ability in SC, building ability in number properties is exactly the same journey. It's no different. It's just that you need a framework that takes you through each of these stages and provides you numerical metrics during these stages. Okay. Here is how your ability improves as you go through these stages. Okay. When you just know the concepts, you're still at about 25th percentile ability. Why? Because each one of you has a certain amount of gray matter or a lot of gray matter. And when you know concepts, there's an implicit application that's already there. But even when you explicitly learn application. But once you've learned application, you achieve that 50th percentile ability. Then as you master application, you achieve that 70th percentile ability. And when you achieve that refined to perfection, that's when you get into that 85th to 97th percentile ability zone or so. Okay. So this is a basic model of learning with regards to any subsection. That model of learning doesn't change whether you're in SC, CR, or RC. Okay. So if you are Abby and you know that your starting ability is around that 60th percentile, where will you be spending application? Where would you be spending your time? If you are this Abby person, what do you think? If your starting ability is that 60th percentile, mastering application, yes. You'll be spending your time mastering application because you won't get to 60th percentile if you've not learned application. So if you're Abby, on the verbal side, this is where you'd be spending time and this is where you'd be spending time. You will not go, if you are an eGMAT student, you're not going to go through eGMAT's concept files because, hey, you've proven to us that you are at that 60th percentile. You'd go through our application files and then you will go through in the mastering application stage, you will go through our cementing quizzes and you would go through our strategic review process so that you master application and then you refine to perfection. Okay. On the quant side, because your ability is really low and you're aiming for that 65th percentile, you're not going to worry about this or you're not going to worry about this because you're not aiming for that Q50. You're only going to worry about these two stages of learning. Does that make sense? When you look at our reviews, if you go to our YouTube channel, you see people, you say, hey man, I went from 690 to 750 in 3 weeks. The reason they do that is because we first help you identify which stage of learning you need help in. Then we create that hyper-specific study plan for you once you are in that 70th to 80th percentile to help you get there. That's where you improve in 3 weeks or so. Okay. Dinesh says, does eGMAT provide a mock to get those subsectional abilities? Yes, we do. In fact, we even provide that service where we help you build that study plan. So if you want to know how to build that study plan, you can actually schedule a call with a GMAT strategy expert. And if you want to know how to take a mock to get those starting abilities, you guys can take a Sigma X mock. It's other than the official GMAT, it's the world's only mock test that gives you those subsectional abilities. Okay. Chase actually is a very different journey. He needs to do everything when it comes to verbal, but when it comes to quant, he only needs to worry about refining to perfection, which is why he only needs 1.5 weeks in quant, and which is why he needs 9 weeks in verbal, because he has this additional step over here. Okay, another thing that you would notice is his refining to perfection is not as dark as Abby's is. Why? Because he's not aiming for that 97th percentile, he's aiming for 91st percentile, and hence doesn't need to spend as much time over there. Okay. And so you need to have these maps right at the very beginning, even before you learn your first concept. This is something that should be on the wall for you, because this is something that will tell you what you've done and how much time do you still need to put in. So when you read this over here, this is why you need to put that I in that. How much time do I need? Her says, how would one start if it's starting for the first time? Take a Sigma X mark, get those starting abilities. Doesn't matter whether you're doing it, taking the first attempt on the GMAT or the fifth attempt. You always have this process. You have to figure out where you are, then you have to figure out what the ability gaps are, and then you have to figure out which stage of learning should you start with to fill those ability gaps. It's as simple as that. The challenge is, how do you track your improvement when you are at any particular stage of learning, which is kind of where eGMAT comes in. We've built technology and content that precisely tracks your improvement for every stage of learning. But let's kind of ask this: how many of you have experienced this level of personalization when you while preparing for the GMAT? How many of you have seen or experienced this personalization? This is what, but it's something that you do, right? You should do while you're doing this. Atul has a great question. He says, to be used for planning, should the first mock be taken after some initial prep? I would recommend, Atul, solve 10 questions in SC, 10 in CR, 10 in RC, and then take the first mock. That's the only prep that I want you to take. Okay, because remember, it's the first mock's about your innate ability, not your prepped ability. All right. So when you get to take those first 10 questions and in quant, make sure you solve a few data sufficiency questions, so that because data sufficiency is one format that most people are not as familiar with. So when you do that, then you get a realistic idea after taking those 10 data sufficiency questions what your innate ability is. Okay. So if you're an eGMAT student, your customer success team, you have a 5% dedicated, they work 100% of the time doing this. They will, if you have access to the PSP tool, build your study plan. If you have doubts even after this session, make sure that you write to them and they'll address those doubts. Okay, but while you're preparing, even before you start preparing, make sure that you have these things absolutely clear. Okay, also we conduct an onboarding session every week, and we want to do more sessions every week for our paid students as well. Just onboarding sessions. Attend those sessions, attend the test readiness sessions that we offer, and if you don't have the 3 stages of learning videos, which are detailed videos, then you should, as you browse through the platform, those videos are available across the platform to you guys. What do I have to say if you've scored a 340 in the first Sigma X mock to start prep? Just start your preparation. You have a long journey to go. What else will I say? I mean, for me, when I look at this, we don't look at someone as a weak or a strong student. What I really see when someone has a low score is that, hey, that person needs to put in more effort. He has a lower starting ability. It's all about your starting ability and the ending ability. The challenge for you is not the fact that you have a low starting ability. The challenge for you is going to be that you've got to maintain your preparation for a longer time. Okay. So if you are not a paid student, take a Sigma X mock and then click on the study plan free trial, and you can work with a strategy expert to get that study plan for you. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have AWN integrated reasoning as covered as a part of this, but if you are an eGMAT student, you have our integrated reasoning course. Once you're done with quant and verbal course, it should take about 8 hours for you to do that. Especially if you're done with the CR piece, I mean, and then quant, it's very easy to go through IR. Okay, AWA, frankly, is about 2 hours of effort. Our students have written guides on how to tackle the AWA. So yeah. And this is the reason why we don't do AWA, because we don't need to, but I can tell you, out of 50,000 students, probably 3 have asked me For AWA, 3 out of 50,000. The other ones don't even bother asking me because they look at those guides and really, once they go through our CR course, AWA just becomes second nature. Okay. So then we have probably the more important question, which is how do you go about building ability, which is, I think, really important. So now you have a study plan with you know your target abilities, um, and you know what stages of learning do you need to start with. You have to now worry about how to build ability. Why? Because even people who have this do not end up scoring a 750. Okay. And this is where I want to set some context, because what I'm going to talk about is, so far what I'm talked about is very different from what you've learned. What I'm going to talk about is also something that's going to be very different than what you've learned about approaching the prep. And the context that I want to set is the kind of success that we've delivered. So when you look at data from 2016, which is when GMAT Club started their verified reviews policy, what's a verified review? A verified review is a review where someone has to provide an official score report link that is live from mba.com to post a review. Okay. Prior to 2016, there was no such requirement. There was no ability to provide a score review link as well. But post 2016, you've got to do that to post a review. Okay. And when you look at us versus other folks, what you're going to find is from 2016 to 2020, more people have posted verified reviews using the score report links for eGMAT than for any other prep company. In fact, if you combine all of these, you're going to find that 1130 number between 2016 to 2020 is still higher. What about in 2021? Okay. What about in 2021? In the last 5 months, when you think about this, between Jan 1 to May 31st, which is where I have this data, about 190 700 plus scores have been reported during this time. Out of those 190, about 40 are by self-prep. So for those of you saying, hey, can you not prepare for the GMAT by your own? Yes, you can, but you can see the percentage of people who become successful over there. There are those who become successful. A majority of them, if you read their debriefs, are people who have that super high innate ability. Okay. The other one, the 1150, are actually attributed to 11 GMAT Club partners. Okay, so how do these 150 scores break up? These 150 scores, 67 out of those are by eGMATers, 44 by target test prep, and pretty much 39 by the other, actually 9 partners, because these two companies are now the same entity. So essentially, when you look at GMAT Club, there are only 2 companies that have delivered any meaningful success. That's us and Target Test Prep. Okay. How about in the month of June? In the month of June, when you look at this, 700 plus reviews that have been posted and reported on GMAT Club. About, I think 40 reviews were, but I think about 40. There are a couple of other companies that which I have not mentioned, but out of 40, 26 were for eGMAT. Okay, and if you look at July, it's going to be more or less a similar ratio with regards to what you see for the first 5 months or so. Atul says, what percentage of students score 700 of eGMAT students score 700? The percentage of students that actually are diligent on our platform, and when I say diligent, when you're studying SC, if you prescribe 15 days, you study SC for 15 days without taking a break. If you're one of those people and you continue doing that, that percentage is about 75% or so. So just to really tell you, these 26 students reported 700 plus scores. The actual number of students who got 700 plus scores based on our internal metrics is close to 160. And which is one of the reasons why, if you look at eGMAT on any part, which is, reviews, and you look at share GMAT experience, and you look at our YouTube channel, you're going to find more students talking about this. Okay. What's the sample size of eGMAT student pool? Can you elaborate that a bit more? I want to make sure I understand that question correctly. So just as a metric, we get about 600 new students every month. And out of those 600 new students, people who studied diligently are about 260, 270. I mean, one thing that if I could do a better job of, if it were in my control, is to really say, hey guys, if you're studying for the GMAT, study diligently. Okay. If you study diligently, there's no reason why you won't get a high GMAT score. Why? Because we give you metrics at every stage of learning. We tell you when you're not learning properly every hour. And those people see those score improvements. And there are people who would see this and say, "Man, I have to worry about my job. I got that warning, but and then the application told me that you're not studying properly, but you still ignored." Anyone over here who scored poorly in a concept file or an application file and ignored that warning? Anyone? Again, I know it's a very daring question I'm asking over here to really say, yes. Don't ignore that warning. Because that warning is there for a reason. That technology is built for a reason. If you take corrective actions, you're going to get to that score in less than half the time. You won't have to take a second attempt. Yeah. So if you go back to the concept files and retake it, then you've not ignored that warning. You've gotten that warning. Then that's the right strategy to do. And you are that diligent student who's there. Bottom line is, if you're here on a Saturday morning or a Saturday evening with me, you at least have the right intent over here, and which is why I'm very hopeful that many of you would actually make up, would contribute to such scores and get to have the opportunity to talk to you or DJ or Payal or one of those, or Archit would get to talk to you guys or so once you get to those 700 plus scores. So I think that's the piece over here. We'll give you everything you need. We'll give you all the tracking. We'll give you all the feedback. It's still you who has to learn. I can't go and take the test for you. That's not the business that we are in. Okay. And that's not the business that we should be in as well. Is the study material that we provide sufficient, or do you have to purchase anything else? You don't have to. And I think if you ask anyone, they'll tell you majority of the people use 60% of the content that we offer. So you don't have to. In fact, if you purchase anything else, it's not going to be even half as comprehensive as what we offer. So what have you learned so far? Okay. Essentially, if you want to get to the top school, you need that 730 plus score. And to get that, you've got to build ability. All right. Personalized study plans. You need those personalized study plans to know what's the optimal path. And then there are these 4 stages, which is what you need to build ability. And I'm going to go into more detail of building abilities. Do we have any 800 scores from eGMAT? Not that have been reported to me. We have perfect verbal scores. We have perfect quant scores. I think what really happens is the guy who gets an 800, that guy has such a high ego, because we see some 800 scores internally on our platform. So I'm sure if I've seen about 100 800 scores on our platform in Sigma X Mocks, correspondingly you will have those scores out there as well. Those guys just don't come back to us. We have 790s, 780s, 770s, a lot of 770s. Unfortunately, not a single 800 score that has been reported. Yeah. Okay, so let's get back. But again, frankly, I don't care about that. 760 is for me good enough, and it should be good enough for most of you. 3 months enough? I don't know. You've got to tell me what your starting ability is, and that's where we have that piece over here. Okay. So, do you recommend taking a SigMock after completing the? No, I don't. This is when you can take a Sigma X mock, guys. Concept files are here. We have so many quizzes to track your performance. Don't take a Sigma X mock here. Don't take a Sigma X mock here. Don't take a Sigma X mock here. Take a Sigma X mock here. Okay. All right. So let's talk about 60th percentile, and this is also the answer to that question. How do you go about building ability? Okay. So when you think about 60th percentile, many people get stuck at 60th percentile, and I'm going to take an example of just one subsection. Why? Because as we know, everything that applies to one subsection also applies to every other subsection. The process of learning is the same. The content of learning may be different, but the process is the same. Okay. So Number of people who, if you are at 60th percentile, how many folks are you with? You are with 80,000 people who are at the same level or better than you. A typical person who gets stuck at 60th percentile spends about 40 hours learning sentence correction. Their starting ability is 30th percentile. Their capability is very similar to what someone who scored 90th percentile. As you can see, 90th percentile means you're in the top 10% of students, which means the top 20,000 students or so. Okay. Time spent learning, 40 hours. Again, the same starting ability, the same ending ability. Okay. How can I understand about the condition in master application and refining? Because we have specific entities that you need to solve in master application and refining to perfection. Not refining the concept, refining to perfection. You have specific entities in Scholarinium that help you do that. So, and then you finish the course, you get access to those entities. There's introduction to those entities that is there. That's how. But again, let's focus on what I'm saying. Okay. So achieving that 90th percentile is going through these stages of learning, achieving perfection at each of these stages of learning, or achieving really, really high quality metrics at each of these stages of learning. And when you think about achieving really high quality metrics, a 60th percentile student thinks about these metrics very differently from a 90th percentile student. Just in the context of sentence correction, a 60th percentile student says that GMAT sentence correction is about learning these 8 major error types, and these error types is in these categories. And a 60th percentile guy, for him, meaning is an error type, and he or she uses splits as a primary technique to solve an SC question. Anyone over here who does that? Uses splits as the primary technique? We'll get to know, because you're going to solve an SC question and you're going to see how bad that approach is. Okay. While learning concepts, they get about 7 to 10 feedback points while learning. Okay. Which is on how well they are learning those concepts. And these people actually go through the concepts fairly well and then practically end up practicing questions 70% of their time. Okay. Anyone recognizes this behavior? Anyone recognizes this behavior? You know, people say, I'm going to rush through the concepts. Now I know all the concepts. Let me just practice, because my way to get better is by practicing. No, that's not how you learn. That's not how. Maybe in school, where you're not taking a test that's talking about ability, where you have a test that's going to have the same questions that you'd get in practice questions. That's not the GMAT. A 90th percentile guy says, hey, GMAT SC is a combination of grammar error types, but it's primarily about sentence structures. And that matrix leads to 200 error types, not 8, but 200, because it's he or she views that as a matrix of sentence structures and these. Why? Because these error types manifest themselves through various sentence structures. Okay. Think about if you were to learn a programming language, you were to really say, okay, if I'm going to use a for loop or an if statement, or if I'm going to use essentially a for loop, I'm going to, or it's been long since I did computer programming. But essentially, let's just worry about a for loop. Then for them, they really just learn a for loop and then start solving pretty much all algorithmic questions or all programming questions. That's the wrong way of doing it. When you're learning a for loop, you've got to really go through a progression and you learn the next level of complexity in a for loop, solve to the next level of questions. People who follow that iterative process get there a lot faster, solve a lot fewer questions, don't get frustrated. Okay, and for them, it's not about the for loop, it's the application of for loops. For them, for is a major concept type, but it manifests itself into multiple different applications, and which is where these 200 different error types come in. For them, meaning is a primary method. For them, learning a programming language is not so much about learning constructs. Yes, you've got to learn constructs. It's about building a mindset of thinking. And for those of you who've learned a programming language, you would agree, right? Learning a programming language is, if you want to be an expert programmer, it's about building a mindset. Way more than about knowing constructs. right? Any programmers here? If you do process optimization, it's also way more about a mindset, and then it's about a set of tools that you use. So for them, they build the right mindset. If you're using splits, you're not building the right mindset. Okay. For them, because of this, it's the number of feedback points that they get is between 80 and 120 while they're doing this piece over there. What are splits? Splits is looking at a sentence correction question and saying, hey, how are the various answer choices different? And then worrying about which difference makes more sense. That's what's called the splits approach. Okay. So they get a lot more feedback and they correct themselves over there while learning concepts and application. And these guys spend about 60% of their time learning. Because they're spending about 60% of their time learning, they don't need to practice a whole lot of questions. When I say a whole lot, they still practice a significant number, but not thousands and thousands of questions. The questions that they practice in SC, for example, are between 100 to 200 questions. Okay. So if these grammar errors manifest themselves across 200 different sentence structures, how can you achieve perfection, especially if you have gaps there, if you get feedback only 7 to 10 times? Okay. The other thing is, what does that feedback tell you in terms of improving on the errors that you're making? Okay. Again, remember, if you don't do this right, this has no relevance because you're gonna whatever practice you do, you're gonna do on a shaky foundation. Okay. This is something that I want to talk about later, but within eGMAT, when you're learning concepts and application, we give you about 100 points of feedback. Okay, and because you build that solid application, you need between 30 and 50 points of feedback while refining application over there. What are the feedback points? We're going to really look at this. I've not talked about what that feedback point is. So we're going to discuss that after we solve a question. Okay, we're going to look at this and how a feedback point helps you improve. All right, so we're going to solve an SC question, and as we solve an SC question, I want you to look at this SC question. I'm going to give you about, actually, I'm not going to time you. I want you to really select still solving. So I want 50 people to select still solving. That way, when you guys choose an option other than still solving, I know you guys are done, and that's how I will call time. So that way, you guys time yourself as a group. I don't time you guys at all. 50 people to say still solving, guys. Come on, get that energy level up. I'm going to show the question when it says 50 people saying still solving. 31. Come on. 33. 38. Another 12. 40. Another 8. 7. All right. 40s. Cool. I have about 49. One more person. Cool. All right. I'm going to remove broadcast results. And don't be biased by the choice C that people have chosen, because you might end up choosing the wrong answer. Okay, here is the SC question. Use the method that you usually use to solve this question. I'm going to mute myself. Okay, here All right, guys, about 80% of you are done. I'm going to give you another 15 seconds. Get those answers in. Five, four, three, two, and one. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. All right. So this is really good. So choice C is the most popular choice. Choice D is really popular as well. Choice E is reasonably popular as well, and choices A and B are not as popular. That's wonderful. You could have rejected choices A and B, or choice A specifically with regards to grammar. So I can really see, when it comes to grammar, you guys have done well. When it comes to meaning, this is where many of you have faltered. So let's kind of look at how we approach this question. Okay. So when you think about this question, it's a completely underlined question, and usually completely underlined questions don't have a ton of splits. But even when questions aren't completely underlined, even when splits clearly exist without meaning, you may have a problem. But so if you kind of think about this question and say, okay, how is this question organized? You say, okay, there are two choices with this piece where you have the church coined. For those of you who say, what's the splits approach? Then you have but in these four choices over here. And then you have that while over here, and you have that as the beginning. And this can say, man, there is too many permutations, combinations. You really can't even effectively apply splits, even if that were possible. Okay, so let's see how we go about solving this question using the meaning-based approach. And then the first step in the meaning-based approach is to make sure that essentially you understand what is it that the author wants to communicate from this. Okay, um, and the way you do that is by strategically pausing at appropriate points in the sentence, so that you create what we call as a sentence structure. Why? Because a sentence structure are the components of a sentence that lead to the entire meaning, or the entire intent that that the author wants to communicate. So let's look at this. The church coined the date February 14 as Valentine's Day. Okay, what? Why did the church coin it? Because the church had an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia. That part is claimed by a few experts, but it is celebrated on this day to honor the Valentine's death or burial. So there's a contrast over here, and that part is the more prevalent belief. So when you think about this and you say, what does the author want to communicate? The author wants to communicate that there are two claims as to why February 14th is celebrated as Valentine's Day. The two claims are very distinct. Claim one is that the church coined it with a very specific motive. Claim two is that it's to honor Valentine's the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. And then claim one is by entity number one, which is a few experts. Claim two is by entity number two, which is kind of in general the more prevalent belief. This is something that you should have extracted. Now remember, I'm not worrying about, are there any grammatical errors in this sentence? I'm just worrying about what is it that the author wants to communicate over here. And I want to extract all of this. Okay. So these are three different aspects. When you were solving this question and when you read choice A, which were the aspects that you were not able to identify and take into account? And you can, this is a multiple response question, so you can choose all three, you can choose 1 and 2, you can choose 2 and 3. So which were the aspects that you did not worry about while solving this particular question? And one of the things that you're going to notice is I'm not going to worry about a whole lot of grammar when it comes to this question, because GMAT SC frankly is not a test of grammar. Grammar is a tool there, but it's primarily a test of meaning and then a test of logic, which is something that you're going to see over here. And aspect 3 is what a lot of you say that you didn't really worry about. And this is really important. Why? Because if you didn't worry about aspect 3, you're going to choose an answer choice which has been the most popular answer choice for this. And then that's and this is where data is really powerful. 83% of you chose aspect 3, and you can really see how that translates into a mistake that you guys made while solving the question. Okay, we've done this poll already. But the feedback over here, and this is where that strategic review process comes in, which is how you improve and refine to perfection. This was the question that we would give you in the refine to perfection stage, is that, hey, if you were able to understand all the aspects, which means congratulations, you understand how to get the intended meaning. If you missed one or two aspects or so, then you need to build that skill set in not in learning how to go about your way around finding out grammatical errors, but how to figure out how to extract the meaning. Yeah, and that feedback is very specific, very personal to you, and that feedback will help you improve right away. If you want to get to that 740, 760 score, or more specifically that 95th percentile ability in SC, you need that specific feedback. Why? Because it's a behavioral level feedback. It's not a concept level feedback. It is, how, when you see an SC question, how should you approach this? How do you extract all of these aspects? We actually have a master comprehension course in which we talk about strategic pausing as a technique, and then we give you feedback on your ability to do strategic pausing. Okay, so let's talk about the errors in the original sentence. And clearly what you see is you have these verbs is claimed and is over here. These verbs do not have their corresponding subjects. Okay, you have a beautiful subject verb pair here, beautiful subject verb pair here, but the two subjects that are missing. So choice A is clearly wrong in this case. Okay, now that you've done this analysis on the original choice, let's kind of analyze the various answer choices over here, and I'm going to show the poll that you guys had, how you polled over here, so that you guys know which answer choice you chose. So this is how you guys polled. I'm going to hide this once again. So choice B says, why with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, a few experts do claim. Who has the ulterior motive in choice B? Who has the ulterior motive? In choice B, the experts, not the church. It's the experts in choice B. Okay. So this choice illogically suggests that the experts present their claim. This is basically your choice B, by the way. So this suggests that the experts present their claim. Okay. And it actually misses why the church coined this. The ulterior motive of the church is completely gone in this case. So when you think about from a meaning standpoint, is it communicated the intended meaning by the author? Okay. It's absolutely wrong. Okay. Everyone who chose choice B gets it why it's wrong? Everyone who chose choice B? Come on, guys, there were a few folks. Okay, perfect. If you say no, you can put the question in the Q&A part, but yes. But again, remember, as a feedback, make sure you get all the aspects of the meaning from the original choice. Okay. Let's look at choice C. Choice C says, while a few experts claim that the church coined blah 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 with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia or Lupercalia, however it's pronounced, their more prevalent belief is. Okay. What's going on in choice C? Choice C says, hey man, the same set of experts are making the claims. Claim 1 and claim 2 were by two different set of experts. Not so much in choice C. Choice C is both the claims are by the same set of experts. Can you guys see this? Which is why choice C is wrong. Again, if you chose choice C, you corrected the grammar error, but you did not observe the meaning error that is introduced. Well, it's not sneaky. It's actually the intent of sentence correction. Think about it, right? Why does the GMAT have sentence correction as a subsection there? It's not to make you grammarians. Business leaders are not grammarians. Business leaders are clear and precise communicators. They may make a grammar error here or there. They're not the most elegant. They don't pen their thoughts in the most elegant fashion, but their thoughts need to be the most precise. And there is this precision that is important when it comes to GMAT sentence correction. About, hey, what is it that you want to say versus what is it that you are saying? And if you want to really say that the two claims come from two different group of experts, and you express that they come from the same group of experts, man, you probably will not do well in the business world. In the academic world, choice C would be beautiful. Why? Because it's constructed really well. It's elegant. The sentence structures are perfect. It corrects the subject. It adds those subjects there. Not in the business world. Unfortunately, you take the GMAT to become an MBA and not a lecturer teaching English literature or language at a university. Which kind of a lot of experts don't understand. It's not about grammar. It's about the precision in communication. Let's look at choice D. Choice D was also very popular. Choice D has a very it's probably the most difficult choice to eliminate. All right. Choice D says the church coined the date February 14 as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, as claimed by a few experts. Okay. I'm going to talk about what this thing does as claimed by a few experts, but its celebration on this date is to, so this is, and we're going to also talk about this is over here, is to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial, the more prevalent belief. Okay. Now in the original sentence, all right, in the original sentence, is the author making any claims or is the author merely communicating information? Is the author really saying, I believe claim 1 versus claim 2? Or I believe one is correct versus the other? No, he's not. He's purely communicating information. What I'm going to prove to you is, in this, he's also communicating information and making the claim by himself. So hold tight. Let's take a very simple sentence, and this is where sentence structures get to that next level. Every option has sentence structures, but here they go to that next level. Apple is the market leader is claimed by Forbes magazine. Okay. Now in this case, are you communicating information? Are you communicating information? Yes. Are you making a claim? Are you making a claim? No. You're not making a claim. You're saying, hey, Apple is a market leader and that claim is made by Forbes magazine. I'm simply telling you that. Okay. Should you be blamed if it turns out that Apple is not the market leader? Do you? No, you don't, because you're merely communicating information, right? You cannot burden that blame. Okay. So when you look at this sentence structure, all you're saying is you're communicating information. Forbes is to be blamed. Absolutely. Let's change this sentence structure to the sentence structure in choice D. Apple is the market leader as claimed by Forbes magazine. What are you doing over here? In this case, what you're really saying is you're using Forbes, you're actually as a source, but you're also saying, hey, believe me, I'm also backing that claim, because, and believe me, because Forbes was also saying that. So are you communicating information? Yes. Are you making a claim here? Yes. Should you be blamed? Absolutely. Can you see the difference of this? Yes, X is claimed by. Let's go to the previous option. Let me show you another very simple version with the use of as. Let's take another simple example here. Okay. Take a very simple example. And again, guys, don't go to grammar. We're talking about what meaning does that sentence structure lead to. Okay. When you say you should buy Google, it's the stock as recommended by the. When you say this, you should buy Google as recommended by the Economic Times, and the should be T. Are you not backing the recommendation of made by Economic Times? Are you or are you not? On the other hand, let's take the word with that. That you should buy Google is recommended by Economic Times. Are you backing it? No. You're just communicating information. And that's a really important piece here to understand. Okay. When it goes to choice D, when you say as claimed by a few experts, okay, and when you say but its celebration on this date is to honor, both of these means that the author agrees with these beliefs. Okay. Okay. And in this case, because this is saying, we're saying that the author agrees with this, it changes the meaning. It's a very subtle difference. Anyone has seen this happen in RC, by the way? Yes, it's very common in RC. The most common way to introduce an error in RC is to really say, hey, if the author is communicating information and the incorrect answer choice will really tell you the author is making a claim. That's the most common incorrect inference type, and we are translating that over here. Okay. Which leads to my correct answer. That the church coined February 14 as Valentine's Day is claimed by a few experts. So you add the subject. But the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. That's the correct answer choice. See, it corrects, it adds the subjects, it maintains all aspects of the meaning, and it doesn't introduce any new error. Okay. Why do people reject choice E? One is they don't get the meaning. One of the biggest reasons why people reject choice E is because they don't get the meaning from hold on, what just happened to my poll? Or something happened to my poll and I don't like this. Short answer, open poll, perfect. Yes. So the reason why people reject this is because they're not familiar with this with the sentence structure. That could be used as a subject. There is that misconception. How many of you really say that rejected this? That there is a that missing over here. That you need that over here. One, yeah. And again, so people come up with these beliefs from somewhere where you say, hey, being can't be in the correct answer choice in sentence correction. Some people really say in critical reasoning, you can't have all or superlatives or best or something in there. No, please do not. So how many of you have actually heard this notion that being, if you see being in an answer choice, it's going to be incorrect 85% of the time? Heard it, yes. What ability scores are you aiming for in SC? What ability scores are you aiming for? If you're aiming for that 740 score, what ability score do you think you'd be aiming for in SC? Out of 100. Ability scores are out of 100, but that 90th percentile. If you're aiming for that 90th percentile ability score, what is the likelihood that you could see being in a correct answer choice? Low, medium, high? Probably is a high likelihood. So when you're studying SC, don't bring stats in there, please. Worry about what's right for SC. When you're studying stats, then bring stats here. The shocking thing is that people still talk about it, even though in 2012 or in 2013, we wrote an article where we really say, we proved that there are a significant number of correct options where being is a part of the correct option. Okay, and here is a link. If you look at this, And this is, we wrote this in I think 2012 or 2013 or 2014. This was written on 15 Jan 2014. Even then, people still consider that, and I don't understand why. Okay. So the key thing over here when you see this is that the reason why people get this wrong is because they fail to observe meaning distortion, and they fail to observe meaning distortion across a variety of sentence structures. Okay. Now, can you really see when you look at these answer choices once again? First of all, can you see a variety of sentence structures here? Can you see a variety of sentence structures in this answer choice? It's the same 7 grammar error types, but they cut across a variety of sentence structures. And when it comes to achieving that 90th percentile, it is about perfecting how to find and correct errors across these sentence structures. This is a 700 level question. I told you this is in that refining to perfection or mastering application stage. Okay. So, and this is just one SC question, and there are about 10 sentence structures in there when you look at how the various clauses were connected. Okay. But if you want to get there, if you want to get to that 90th percentile, you want to solve such questions consistently. You want to get 65% of such questions right, to be very precise. Okay. The piece which is there is, this is not the first question, that you should start solving. Why? Because you've got to go through these stages of learning, and you've got to get feedback during this. If you don't have the right foundation, this most likely is going to be a disaster. Okay. So how do you build the right foundation? What is that feedback point that I was talking about there, and how does that manifest itself into that 80% likelihood of you getting to that 730 plus score if you are consistent? Okay. Feedback. Let's see how this feedback leads to perfection in all areas. Okay. We're going to talk about why we have these many points of feedback here. Okay. Here's a guy who actually went from a 71st percentile in verbal to a 96th percentile in verbal in about 3 weeks. And the reason was, it's very clear where he needed focus. It was in CR. He was really bad in CR and not as great in SC. He knew the application, but he needed to master application and refine to perfection. And in 3 weeks, because you were able to identify these gaps, he was able to get to this place. And you can go download his ESRs over here. He got into Columbia and Booth. He's actually just joined Booth. He's the first guy over here, Jim Yee. And for him, again, the reason I want to say this is because I want to talk about this grammar plus meaning. He says solid grammar can only help you solve easy to medium questions. This guy is a Chinese Canadian. He studied in Canada, so he knows the grammar piece, and he knew the grammar piece. But he says grammar plus meaning will carry you forward all the way up to V40 plus. And then similarly in pre-thinking is about, in CR it's about pre-thinking. Okay. Kim, very similar story. Problem in reading comprehension, really good abilities over here, and we helped her excel reading comprehension as well. And again, refining to perfection also helped her get the highest possible score in sentence correction. Okay, so let's see how this feedback's delivered. Here's a dashboard view of one of our older students who scored 730. This is the simplest view that I can tell you. This is the smallest module on the platform. This is our subject verb module. What you see over here is that every activity that you have is rated, and there's a score that you get, and we track the time that you spend. So when you access a concept, there's every concept file. This is a video concept, which is a dynamic video, which means that it's not an MPEG-4 video that's very linear. You have to interact with it, and so this file sends about 50 interactions to our platform, and we've built a backend just to consume those interactions. So It looks at and says, have you accessed the concept? Yes. Did you spend enough time? And how does that notion of enough time happen? Because we have about 60,000 students who've attempted this concept. About 35,000 of them have done it well. So we know what's the range of time, the 60 percentile block in which if you do it well, if you're focused, you'd get to, you'd do it well. And then there is a quiz at the end that also evaluates, that gives solid proof that you've understood this, and which is where you get these scores over here. Now in this case, you see this SV application file, he actually didn't do as well. He scored 60%, but he did spend a lot of time on revising his mistakes, which is why in the practice quiz that confirms whether he knows how to apply or not, he got 100%. Now, why is this feedback important? Can anyone tell me? Can you tell me why is that feedback important? Sorry about that. Why do you think that that feedback's important? I want to hide this and make sure this short answer part is important. No, it's not about time management. To rectify the mistakes that you've made. What the sentence structures in the context of SC that you faltered on over here, if you don't revise those, you're not going to get 100% here. Okay, and which is why this validation is really important. Okay, to correct it right then and there. Imagine what would happen if this guy had those gaps in these sentence structures. Now, this is the subject verb block. It's one of the fundamental blocks. If those gaps remain, you know, in some sentences you have super sentence structures. Those gaps would not only impact your ability to answer simple questions, but also more complex questions that are built on the same sentence structures. Okay. Can the feedback pinpoint exact deficiency? Yes, because the deficiency appears only based on practice. So these files have practice questions in there. As I said, they're not linear videos. You have to interact with it. So the feedback's given based on the interaction. Okay, and you know where you faltered. It's about you focusing right then and there on that. Okay. Now, why is tracking this time important? Can anyone tell me? Why is that important? Okay, accuracy. It's indicative of effort. Yes, some people, for example, would go through this file and would spend 2 hours on this. Okay. Has anyone, while studying for the GMAT, put in 30 minutes and then said, let me go watch a 10-minute YouTube video, and while watching that 10-minute YouTube video went from one video to the other, or has gone on Facebook while studying for the GMAT? Yes. Do you think you're going to be able to remember those concepts if you really do this in the middle of learning a concept? Absolutely not. And this is where tracking that time is important, because if you're doing those activities, then I can get you the best course. You're not going to improve. And that's where tracking that data and comparing and having that reference point of thousands of successful students is really important to give you the right kind of feedback. Okay. The star icon indicates, yes, how much. It's kind of, think of it as a fill circle. So how do you take breaks then to prevent content overload? That's a great question. That's excellent question. I love the kind of questions you're asking. Let the concept finish, man. Or if you want to just take a break, write down what you've learned. Don't watch a video. You know, if you want to take a break, go out, pause it, and go out, talk to someone. The problem with watching a YouTube video is, and I know this is very difficult during the pandemic. Trust me, I understand how difficult it is, especially if you're in India. But you know, I would recommend don't take a break while watching, and that's one of the reasons why most of the concepts are 30 to 35 minutes or so. You can power through that 35 minutes. Okay, if you have to take a break, and that's something that I do that works for me. You know, I either go and do a set of push-ups, or the second thing is I love listening to music. Listen to music with headphones on. Does pausing in the middle of the module count towards total time? Not in the middle of the module, in the middle of an activity, yes. So this is an act. So verbs is a module. This is an activity. And yes, it does count to the total time. Okay. But frankly, middle of an activity, do not pause. If you think you are not fresh, take a break before you start an activity. Okay. Don't pause in the middle of an activity, please. There's a reason why you have learning combined into an activity. Together, it creates a learning in your mind. Okay. Because the GMAT, as you guys probably understand, it's not about knowing the content, it's about internalizing and understanding it. Does that help? Great questions. Now here's another piece here. Again, difficult concepts in this case. The guy spent a ton of time. Here, he scored 64% in this practice quiz, and yet what you can't see over here is that he scored 100% over here. Why did he score 100% here? Because we know he revised those mistakes. Why? Because he bookmarked these questions. This is the quiz results screen of the page where he scored 64%. Okay. So here is what he said. He said, for me, the biggest thing was application of concepts. My concepts weren't bad. He said, essentially what he's saying is I knew the grammar rules. Yes, many of you would know grammar is grammar. It's the application that matters. The same way, when it comes to doing an MBA, I can tell you, if I gave you a 3-page paper, each one of you would know 5 forces. If I were to ask you how to apply those 5 forces to conceive an industry structure, you guys, 90% of you, in fact, half the MBAs would falter on that. Okay. So, if you're an eGMAT student, make sure that you have your study plan, you attend the onboarding sessions, and attend the test readiness sessions if they do this. Okay. If you're a free trial student, take a Sigma X mock, work with a strategy expert, get that study plan, and try the free trial out. Okay. And this is where that feedback's really important. One of the things that you will see if you go on our YouTube channel is that people who excel, they have excellent scores across. These 500 points of feedback that we provide all across the course. So about 120 odd points in every subsection. These guys ace 90% of those metrics. Whether they do it in the first attempt or do it right away, that is immaterial, but they ace 90% of those metrics. Okay. So again, if you need help with the study plan, that's you need help over here. You can click the link here. What are onboarding sessions like this one? No, this is not an onboarding session. This is a free session that's open to everyone, whether you're a paid student or not. An onboarding session is only for paid students. I see a really great question. It says, as we progress with newer modules, I find myself questioning if I remember the older concepts and getting cold feet while learning newer ones. How do you prevent that? That's a great question. So 2 or 3 things that we recommend that you do that. We recommend that every Sunday you reserve 1 hour to review things. Okay, that's one piece. Reserve 1 hour. The second thing is, as you solve, and let's go back over here. Let's go to this guy over here. As you solve questions, as you make mistakes, or if you feel you've learned something, you can bookmark these. Now, when you on every Sunday, as you go to the bookmarks pane, you can really filter them by last 1 week and revise those. The same thing with forum posts. If you post a doubt internally and if you want to revise that, do that. And as you do that, you're not going to forget these things. Now, the beauty of this is in every course, whether it's SCCR and RC, there's progressive application. You're not learning concepts. You're learning how to apply them to sentence structures. So that's what's more important. Okay. What's the total content count in hours? Upwards of 300 hours, but most of you will not need upwards of 300 hours, as I said. Okay. Does that help answer your question about how to revise? Well, how do you attend one? Write to the support team, and they will actually tell you when the next onboarding session is. It's on different days of the week. Okay. With that, let me share the session PDF. How much mental math should you know before a decent performance in quant? Not a whole lot. I mean, you should know some basic things, but remember, quant is about being methodical, very similar to verbal. Okay, quant is about following the process skills. In fact, we have the attend the quant launch. We've been launching this quant course for the last 3 months, and it has delivered twice as many Q49 plus scores as Target Test Prep has. This is a phenomenal course. This is a course that has upwards of 1,000 learning paths. So which means that if you're a Q40 student or a Q45 student or a Q48 student, you start with the course, you only learn content that you need to learn. You can see how this is a groundbreaking architecture. Our verbal courses are going to go and follow that architecture very soon. Also, connect with me on my LinkedIn. Okay. We post about 5 articles every week or so. You can connect with me, and that way you stay updated with all things eGMAT and all things MBA, or quite a few things MBA in the MBA world. And also you can connect with me on our YouTube channel. The student says, I consistently score 720 to 740 on official mocks. How can I maximize that score to 770? If you're an eGMAT student, we can help you because we have your stats. If just from an official mocks, I can't. So yes, can the verbal only course help me with the last mile in verbal? If that's the only place, yes, the verbal only course will help you. I would recommend that rather than taking the verbal only course, take the GMAT online for 2 months. It's going to cost the same. If you really just need the last mile, you should be done in 20-25 days or so. The benefit of taking GMAT online for 2 months is you'll get access to all the Sigma X mocks, which will give you way more analytics than anything else. So yeah. What's the validity of your GMAT score? It's 5 years from the date that you take the test, and it's valid for everyone. When is Verbal 2.0 due to be launched? Verbal is actually in Verbal 3.0. So our quant course, so just as some background, our original quant course was not created by Payal. It was created by another instructor. This is the first time that the quant course Payal's created the quant course, and Payal created all our verbal courses. So this is a very different quant course than anything else. Do we have enough questions for quant practice on the eGMAT board? Oh, absolutely. And remember this, we have 40 people who are dedicated to 40 people who work full time. And this is really important, who work full time, who are dedicated to your success. Most prep companies have 6 people who work full time or so, and if that. Okay, so do we have enough questions? Is Quant 2.0 already on the platform? Yes, it is. I think it was launched on Thursday, if I remember. Yes, it was. I mean, all the content was uploaded on Thursday. And for those of you who want to kind of get some feedback on Quant 2.0, you can read this one review, and then let me also. You can also read how, I mean, Quant 2.0, we don't build a course and just continue doing it on our own. We also get feedback. So for those of you who want to get feedback on Quant 2.0, and that study plan thing on the top right hand corner, you should be seeing the feedback that people gave on Quant 2.0, and you can see what people said about Quant 2.0, and you will see that every Quant 2.0 course has gone through an alpha and a beta trial. Naveen says, what happens during an onboarding session? Actually, guys, I'm going to clear up the short answer pod. If you have a question, put it in the Q&A pod, which is in the bottom left-hand corner. What happens during an onboarding session? An onboarding session is primarily, although not exclusively, but primarily for students who bought the course in the last 1 week. We want to make sure that you guys understand how to go about doing the course. So there's some overlap with what goes on in this session, but what we also do in that course is put in real case studies of people, and they're people who've actually done things well in the first go. They're people who have faltered and scored poorly. So not every EG matter um, succeeds, but every EG matter who actually has the right metrics succeeds. So we talk about, hey, look at this guy, he succeeded, and he look at his metrics. Look at this guy who failed and look at his metrics, and then you'll see a clear indication of failure right from the first 30 hours that person invested the time. We also have case studies of people who actually failed initially, then reach out to us and say, hey, help me. And then we told them, this is why you failed. They improved upon it and they succeeded eventually. So, and you'd also see the delta in metrics over there. So the idea really is to make sure that you actually use the platform in the right way the first time. You actually get that shortest path to your target GMAT score. So Naveen, I hope that helps you with regards to what happens. When is the next onboarding session? It's every week. So again, if you write to the team, they will tell you when the next onboarding session is. Yes, Akansha, write to support@e-gmat.com. Yes, that's your support team. Quant 2.0 is basically a newer, updated version of the Quant. It's actually a complete redesign. The old Quant courses have been archived. It's a complete redesign of the Quant course. It's a brand new learning architecture. If you look at the link that I talk about that I have over here, if you read the first post, which is when we started the Quant course last year, we've been working on it for the last year and a half. About 150 man months have gone in it, or equivalent to about uh, what but uh, 10 man years of effort has gone in this. Oh, we're done with the webinar. If you guys want to drop off, that's there. This is the time when I answer your questions that you have. So the content's done. You can actually download the PDF. Why did I not share the PDF? Here is the session PDF that you guys can download. It says SS1 July 15th. Is Quant do the same Quant course that comes with the Quant bundle? Yes, it is. Yes, and with GMAT Online. Once the Quant course gets launched, will earlier Quant course be accessible? If you've attempted the earlier Quant course, yes, it will always be accessible to you. If you have not attempted the earlier Quant course, then it's not. Because this one is way, way, way better than the older one. So if you have attempted the earlier one, then yes, we preserve your attempts. That's valuable data. So we give you access to this. And for you in your dashboard, you'd see, hey, you're attempting a newer course. If you want to see your old attempts, you will see a link, then you can go and attempt that. Okay. All right. If we Smanik says if we score bad in a quiz, do we revise the concepts again, and where can we practice the revised concepts? It's the same file. You click on it again, and you do that. All right. With that, guys, I want to thank everyone for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you on eGMAT.com. Again, don't forget we have the number property session tomorrow, and the quant launch on Wednesday. Thank you, and happy learning. If you're unable to download the PDF, you probably, if you're watching this through a mobile device, you probably would be unable to download the PDF. I will send the recording later on today. And with that, as I send you'll have a link in your email to download the PDF as well. Okay, thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening or a wonderful day, depending on the time zone that you are in.